It's roughly 30,000 years ago. You're a human. You're standing at the mouth of a cave somewhere in what will one day be called Europe, and the wind coming off the ice sheet 300 miles north has just found the gap between your shoulder blades. You are wearing, at best, a poorly stitched hide. You have no thermostat, no down jacket, no hot shower waiting, no pharmacy, no grocery store. The temperature tonight will drop to around -20. You have not eaten a real meal in 2 days. And somewhere out in the dark, something with very large teeth is also cold, and also hungry, and it can smell you. You are, statistically, not supposed to make it to spring. And yet, here you are, reading this, which means somebody in your family line, some skinny, shivering, underdressed ancestor of yours, made it through that night, and the next one, and the one after that, for thousands of winters in a row, long enough to pass their genes down through 100 generations of frost-bitten grandparents, until, eventually, one of them became you. So the question is deceptively simple. How? How did people with almost no technology, no insulation, no medicine, and no idea what a calorie even was, how did they survive winters that would kill a modern adult in a weekend? The short answer is, they cheated, in about 6 different ways at once. The long answer is what this video is about. Let me tell you what your ancestors actually did. The fat problem. Start with the thing nobody wants to talk about. Cold doesn't kill you the way you think it does. It doesn't reach in and freeze your heart. It kills you by making you burn through your own body faster than you can refill it. Shivering, at full intensity, burns roughly 5 times your resting calorie rate. A modern person, sitting in a cold room, can burn through 2,000 extra calories a day just trying not to die. Now imagine doing that for 4 months. Your ancestors figured this out long before they had a word for calorie. What they had was a word, or a gesture, or a grunt, for fat, and they wanted it, all of it. Researchers studying Upper Paleolithic sites in Europe and Siberia have found something striking in the animal bones left behind. The bones are broken, not chewed, cracked open, deliberately, with stones, to get at the marrow, and the skulls are smashed for the brain, and the long bones are boiled for the grease inside them. Nothing was wasted, because nothing could be. A hunter-gatherer in a cold climate, according to studies of modern Arctic peoples, needs somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 calories a day just to stay alive in winter. That's 2 to 3 times what you probably ate today. And a huge chunk of it, sometimes 70%, came from fat. Not lean meat, fat, marrow, organ meat, rendered animal grease, eaten by the spoonful. There's a condition modern explorers rediscovered the hard way when they tried to live off rabbits in the north. It's called rabbit starvation. You can eat rabbit after rabbit, stuff yourself, feel full, and still starve to death, because rabbit meat is too lean. Without fat, your body can't process the protein. Your ancestors knew this, not on paper, in their bones. They hunted the fattest animals they could find, in the fattest season they could find them, and they ate the parts we throw away. That is not primitive. That is breathtaking. The fire thing. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. Fire is the obvious answer, right? They had fire. Case closed. Except fire, on its own, is almost useless against a real winter. An open flame in an open cave loses most of its heat to the sky in about 15 minutes. Sit 6 feet from a campfire in -20, and you'll have a warm face and hypothermic feet. So they didn't just have fire. They engineered around it. Archaeologists have found hearths in Ice Age sites that are deliberately dug into the ground, pit-hearths, lined with stone, positioned at the back of a shelter, banked with earth to trap and slowly release heat through the night. Some sites in what's now Ukraine have entire huts built out of mammoth bones, with the hearth in the center and the sleeping platforms arranged around it in a tight ring. That is not a caveman throwing sticks on a pile. That is a heating system. And the fuel changes with the geography. In treeless regions, your ancestors burned bone, actual bone. The fat inside old carcasses, kept dry, burns hot and long, and it doesn't need forest. Sites in the Russian plain, show hearths where the ash is almost entirely burnt bone. They were, essentially, running their homes on animal fat, indoors, thousands of years before anyone invented a chimney. They also learned to bank a fire, to bury the coals under ash at night so they'd still be alive in the morning. Losing your fire in a real winter wasn't inconvenient. It could be the thing that killed the whole group, so one person, every night, was responsible for the coals. Think about that for a second. Somewhere out there, 30,000 years ago, there was a very tired human who could not fall asleep because they were the one on fire duty. You have their genes. You're welcome. The clothing revolution nobody talks about. Here's a thing that will bend your brain a little. There's a moment in human history, and it happens surprisingly late, when your ancestors invent the sewing needle. Not the concept of covering yourself. That's much older. The needle, a thin piece of bone or ivory with a hole drilled through one end, so you can pull sinew through hide and actually stitch two pieces of skin together into a shape. The earliest confirmed eyed needles are around 40,000 years old. Some Denisovan finds may push it back further, and it doesn't sound like much. It's a needle. But it is arguably one of the most important pieces of technology any human being has ever invented. Because before the needle, you could drape a hide over yourself. After the needle, you could tailor. You could make a sleeve that actually seals at the wrist, a hood that actually seals at the face, layered clothing that traps warm air against the skin the way modern thermal wear does, fur turned inward against the body, hide turned outward against the wind, stitched, fitted, closed at every gap. This is the difference between wearing a blanket and wearing a coat. And it may be the single technology that let your ancestors follow the herds up into latitudes that would have killed a naked ape in one night. There are researchers who argue, quite seriously, that the humble bone needle is what allowed modern humans to spread across the entire cold half of the planet. Whole continents opened up, because somebody figured out how to sew. Let that sit with you for a second. You are descended from a tailor. The super predator theory. Okay, food, fire, clothes. That's the boring answer. Now let's talk about the weird one. Ancient humans didn't just survive winter, they exploited it. Winter, in the Ice Age, was actually the best hunting season, if you were the kind of primate willing to be brave and stupid at the same time. Here's why. In summer, big animals, mammoths, bison, reindeer, wild horses, are strong, fast, well-fed, and scattered. In winter, they concentrate. They follow predictable migration routes. They cluster near water. They get lean. They get slow. And in deep snow, if you know what you're doing, you can drive one into a drift where it can't move. And a single adult mammoth is somewhere around 8,000 pounds of food. 8,000 pounds. In one kill. Archaeologists have found mass kill sites. Animals driven off cliffs, into bogs, into ravines, where the sheer volume of meat is almost incomprehensible. And here's the trick. Winter is the freezer. You could not, in July, kill a mammoth and eat it before it rotted. In January, you could kill a mammoth and it would keep, more or less, for months. The cold that was trying to kill you was also, if you were clever, preserving your food supply. So your ancestors didn't just endure winter, they planned for it. They killed in the autumn, cached the meat under stone or in permafrost, and ate through the dark months from a larder built by their own hands. Some sites in Siberia show storage pits dug into the ground, filled with butchered meat, covered with rocks to keep scavengers out, refrigerators, 30,000 years old. They weren't stupid. They were, in a very real sense, running a logistics operation. The group problem. But none of this works alone. And this is the part people miss. A single human, no matter how tough, cannot survive an Ice Age winter by themselves. You cannot hunt a mammoth alone. You cannot keep a fire alive 24 hours a day alone. You cannot sew a full winter outfit while also gathering fuel, while also processing meat, while also watching for predators, alone. The math doesn't work. You survived because you were in a band, probably 15 to 40 people, extended family, mostly, and every single one of them had a job. Someone tended fire, someone butchered, someone sewed, someone taught the kids which plants under the snow could still be dug up. Someone remembered. Because nobody had written anything down yet, where the herds went 2 winters ago, in a year that looked like this one. That last person, by the way, was almost certainly old, which is another thing worth pausing on. Your grandmother is a survival technology. In pre-agricultural societies, elders were the library. They were the people who had seen the bad winter of 40 years ago and knew what to do when the signs came back. In a world with no writing, killing your old people would have been suicidal. So you fed them, even when food was scarce, especially when food was scarce. There's a beautiful, uncomfortable idea in anthropology called the grandmother hypothesis. The suggestion that human females live so long past reproductive age, which is genuinely unusual among mammals, because grandmothers made the difference between a band that made it through winter and a band that didn't. Your great-great-grandmother, 40,000 times back, is the reason you're here, not because she fought a bear, because she remembered. Let that sink in. The sleep thing. Here's a small, strange one. Your ancestors slept differently in winter. We know this partly from studying modern hunter-gatherer societies that still live in cold environments, and partly from what we can infer about metabolism. In deep winter, with less food and less light, human bodies downshift. You sleep more, you move less, you conserve. There's a theory, not fully settled but increasingly supported, that pre-industrial humans practiced something like a mild seasonal torpor, not hibernation. Nothing that dramatic, but a slower, longer, more clustered kind of sleep, piled together in a shelter, under shared hides, sharing body heat like a litter of puppies. Body heat, by the way, is not a metaphor here. A healthy adult puts out roughly 100 watts of heat, all the time. That's a light bulb. 10 adults in a small shelter is a small space heater running constantly. Add a banked fire, a low ceiling, hides over the entrance, and you can raise the interior temperature by 20 degrees over the outside without spending a single extra calorie. You are the furnace. Your family is the furnace. This is why, even now, in a blackout, the first survival advice is, gather in one small room and close the doors. Your ancestors already knew. The smell thing. Here's a curiosity that surprised me when I first ran into it. Winter kills you in ways you don't expect. Not just the cold, the dry. Air in the deep cold holds almost no moisture, and every breath you take pulls water out of your lungs. Frostbite is famous. Dehydration is quieter, and it kills just as reliably. You can freeze to death faster if you're dry, which means your ancestors had to melt snow, constantly, and they had to do it inside, near the fire, because eating snow directly cools you from the inside and costs more calories than the water is worth. Every shelter in a real winter would have smelled like the same 3 things: smoke, wet hide, and slowly melting animal broth. That was the smell of survival. That was the smell of home. There is something almost unbearable about that image, if you sit with it. A small, dark, smoky shelter, a pot of something warm, someone stitching, someone rocking a baby, someone snoring under a pile of furs, wind screaming outside, and inside, the entire universe fitting into one room. The unpredictability problem. But now the hard part, because I don't want to romanticize this too much. Winters killed people, a lot of people. Skeletal evidence from the Upper Paleolithic shows an astonishing number of individuals with signs of what researchers call developmental stress, lines in the enamel of the teeth called hypoplasias that record moments where a growing child nearly starved. Almost every ancient skeleton has them, which means almost every ancient child, at some point, came very close to not making it. Infant mortality in these societies is estimated at somewhere between 30 and 50%. Half of all babies didn't see their 5th birthday. And winter was when most of them died. Not from cold directly, usually. From the collapse of everything around them. A missed hunt, a lost cache, a sick mother, a fire that went out. In a system running that tight to the edge, one bad break could take out an entire family in a week. Your ancestors knew grief in a way we have mostly forgotten. Every band would have had graves, small graves, and they would have kept walking. That is the part the campfire glow doesn't show you. The cleverness we underestimate. And yet, and this is the thing I keep coming back to, they didn't just endure it, they kept getting better at it. Across tens of thousands of years, the toolkit got more sophisticated, the needles got finer, the shelters got warmer, the storage pits got bigger. Someone somewhere figured out how to smoke meat so it would keep longer. Someone else figured out that a certain kind of moss made a decent insulating layer stuffed inside a boot. Someone else figured out that if you rendered the fat from a seal, you could burn it in a stone lamp and light the inside of an igloo for hours. None of these people had a school. None of them had a teacher who wasn't also somebody's aunt. And yet the knowledge accumulated. Generation after generation. Grandmother to grandchild. A slow, patient, uncelebrated engineering project spread across 1,000 winters. You are the end of that project. Or at least, the current page of it. The part I want you to feel. Here's what I want to leave you with. When you sit tonight in a heated room, and the wind hits the window, and you notice for a half second that it's cold outside, I want you to remember that the reason that observation is a passing thought for you, and not a life or death emergency, is because somewhere upstream of you, a very long chain of people did not fail. They did not fail to find the fat. They did not fail to keep the fire. They did not fail to sew the coat. They did not fail to remember the story of the last bad year. They did not fail to hold each other through the long dark, in a room that smelled like smoke and hide and broth, while something outside howled. Every single one of them made it to spring, because if any one of them hadn't, you wouldn't be here. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, one of the most extraordinary inheritances a human being can carry. You are the direct descendant of tens of thousands of consecutive winter survivors. Every ancestor you have, without exception, was tough enough, clever enough, and lucky enough to see one more sunrise on the other side of the cold. Your bloodline has a 100% winter survival rate up until the moment it produced you. You were made for this. So here's my question, and I want you to actually think about it before you scroll. If you could go back, just for one night, and sit in that mammoth-bone hut with them, share their broth, feel the heat of that banked fire on your face, hear the wind trying and failing to get in, would you go? Would you want to meet the people who spent their whole lives making sure you got yours? Tell me down in the comments. I read them, and I'll see you in the next one.